Hello, my name is Simon Torrance. I'm the Chief Executive of STL Partners and the Telco 2.0 initiative. I'm going to talk about personal data and telco's role in the next evolution of the web. I'm going to cover three things in this talk. I'll describe what I mean by personal data and why it's so important to individuals, organizations and governments. I'll explain some of the issues around exploiting it and discuss some of the activities that are going on in the market today. And then finally, I'll try and show why telcos in particular should move fast to create strategies in this space. The presentation I'm going to give is based on around our collaboration with the World Economic Forum's Rethinking Personal Data project. And I'd like to make a special thank you to some of the members in particular who've helped us with some of the analysis that you'll see in this presentation. In particular, Bill Hoffman, Kalia Hamlin, Mark Davis, Shane Green, Scott David, John Clippinger and Sandy Pentland. Thank you to them. Now, let's start by understanding why in particular personal data is so important, and particularly to telcos. Well, in October of last year, we took part in a workshop run by the World Economic Forum with a group of strategists from the telecoms industry to look at what are the big strategic opportunities that the industry could focus on to add greater value in a, let's call it a hyper-connected world. And there were 6 key things that the group of senior execs thought were really important to look at from a macro point of view, opportunities for telcos to really add value in the new digital economy. At one level, of course, cloud computing and trying to create infrastructures to support that is very important. Another level, how can we create the right business case for infrastructure investment? Pretty normal day-to-day things there. At a more, probably maybe unusual level, we looked at the importance of being able to partner better with other industries. Increasingly, telcos want to partner with advertising, payments, banks, media companies, governments, and so on. How do we do that better? And critically, if we're starting to get involved in payments and other industries, how do we create new types of regulation that enable cross-border, cross-industry collaboration? But the 2 top areas, the 2 things voted as most strategically important for the industry, I think are quite instructive. The second most important was we need to redefine the fundamental business model of the telecoms industry and the way it innovates. And that's something that Telco 2.0 has been focused on for the last 5 years. But the thing that came out highest, maybe surprisingly, was this. Strategically, it would be very useful if the telecoms industry could drive the creation of a global trust framework for personal data and digital identities. So let's look at why that might be the case. So let's firstly look at what we mean by personal data. Well, our definition is everything about you and me that is captured digitally, now and forever. Who I am, who I interact with, what type of content I use, my measurements, the data about my health, who I'm interacting with at any one stage, the devices I use, all this rich data that flows around the internet and particularly flows around over telco networks. Why is it important now and increasingly so? Well, our view is that 2012, maybe we can call it the year of big data. It's a phrase that's been bandied about by commentators for some time, and it seems to be becoming a bigger and bigger issue. What we mean by that is the huge amounts of data being generated due to an increased use of the internet and the increasing digitization of all aspects of life, from e-commerce, using social networks, smart meters, call records, online viewing habits, online healthcare records, the increasing number of government identity schemes. Witness India with 200 million citizens being signed up to an identity scheme in the last few months. Google digitizing nearly anything you look at, books, maps, whatever. GPS, connected objects, and critically, smartphones and all the data exhaust that they generate. One estimate has it that 600 billion geospatially tagged transactions per day are happening in the USA alone at the moment. Of course, this is all enabled by cheaper, more flexible, more responsive cloud computing. And all this big data is generating big business as well. So the process of gathering, storing, analyzing, and using customer data is now valued at about $800 billion by Forrester. So that sounds like good news. There's huge social and commercial value from what the World Economic Forum calls a new class of economic asset, personal data. so that we as consumers could get potentially more personalised and relevant services. Enterprises can understand how to service better. We could get cheaper products. And for government, we could get better healthcare and public service outcomes related to traffic management, energy consumption, and so on. So some people are saying data is the new oil. It's lying under the ground, waiting to be exploited with the right infrastructure. But at the same time, there are significant concerns about these developments in terms of security of data, personal privacy, and even the whole concept of freedom of movement on the internet. There are worries about 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl-style data leakage, phone hacking scandals, the worries by civil liberties groups about law enforcement infringement, and as an individual, the impact of healthcare data on my insurance premiums. At the same time, there are inappropriate terms of service based on contracts of adhesion, which have been designed in the industrial era. At another level, once we understand it better, we worry about the creepy nature of some of the online advertising tracking that goes on. In a recent test, 50 of the most popular websites in the United States installed over 3,000 tracking files on a single PC. One US company trades data on 200 million users without their explicit knowledge. So we have some fundamental questions around personal data. Are search engines optimized for users or for advertisers? Do we want one monolithic social network to manage all of our interactions on the internet? Are we as individuals in control of our online life? Are we getting genuine value for our personal data? Or are we locked in a Faustian pact with enterprises and advertisers? Are we reaching the limits of our tolerance? Or is this a case of Stockholm syndrome, whereby we come to love our digital captors? Is the zeitgeist today summed up by this cartoon? It's fine, but they sell your information. And by this cover of Time magazine, your data for sale. Everything about you is being sold. Get over it. So to answer those questions and think more effectively about them, we need to keep 3 constituents in mind. There is the enterprises who want to sell things to me. There is me as the individual and the citizen and the consumer. And there is the public sector and government. And there are 3 key issues. One is about the flow of the data itself, but equally important, the flow of the rights that goes with that data and the flow of the money or the value that goes with that data. Today, these are misaligned and enterprises are overly dominant in this relationship. So we need some guiding principles to enable new and better approach to business in this context of big data and personal data. And the World Economic Forum Rethinking Personal Data project has tried to lay these out. The first key point is that we need to appreciate that people are now producers, not just consumers. We produce and generate data about ourselves, which has a significant value. We need to give individuals not only access, but also control over the use of their personal data. And we need to incentivize customers, citizens, individuals to share their data, to make it worth their while to do so in a manageable way that suits their requirements around privacy and control. But equally, we need to make data portable, so it doesn't just reside in one social network. We can take it from one place and use it in other situations. We need to make that data mashable as well. If we can mash up our personal data with other data, we can create something of significant extra value. And we need to, as enterprises, make privacy and data practices a point of key competitive differentiation. Ultimately, what we need are new rules that govern the personal data and new tools to help us take advantage of them. So one of the key areas that we've been looking at is what are those new rules and tools? And ultimately, we need to put the individual, me, at the top of the triangle now, put me in control. And we need to create personal data services that act as custodians of my data. Looks after the data for me and helps me take advantage of it and put it to work. We need to help individuals like me and you gather, store, analyze, and use information about ourselves in the same way that enterprises gather, store, analyze, and use information about their customers. So there's a new class of service emerging here that acts on behalf of the individual. And we might call it personal data stores. They store data in a way that is controlled, a bit like banks storing my money. They manage my personal profiles. Today I'm talking to you as a business person. At the weekend I'm a dad, and other parts of the weekend I might run a football team. I have different personas in different contexts, and I need to be able to manage those profiles accordingly to get the sort of benefits we talked about earlier on. There's a movement around vendor relationship management, not just customer relationship management, where I manage the suppliers I want to interact with rather than people pushing things at me. And for instances like managing my own healthcare, I want to have some personal informatics and analytic capabilities that I can use. Now, we then get into interesting realms whereby this data, once it's controlled and managed, we can start to put it to use. And we need fourth parties who can act as brokers for our data in the way that we are happy for it to be used, to connect that data with other people who can turn that into something of value. And of course, we need clear privacy protection tools to allow me to open or close the amount of data I want to expose at any one time. Now, wrapping around that, we need some new governance, and that means not only legal governance, and of course, laws are different in different states, but just as we manage to transfer money around the world effectively, we need to have governance mechanisms and laws that allow us to transfer data around the world securely and effectively, laws that we adhere to. We need to be able to embed data in code and be able to use code to embed the data with rights and permissions. And clearly we need to match that to the identifiers for me and other people on the internet. So being able to match that to my personal identifiable information, like email addresses, passwords, etc. Now, the status today of developments in the area that I just talked about is as follows. New regulations are coming in. Sometimes they are inappropriate and damaging because they can't keep up with the technological development and behaviour of people online. So there are rules around do not track on privacy and opt-in, which are being created in good faith, but sometimes they're not, I suppose, as productive as they could be. So we need to get closer to government and legislators to help them understand this new world, what is possible, and help them to craft laws that are appropriate to allow the social and economic benefits of personal data to be realised. There are some good examples around the world. In the United States, the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, NSTIC, is producing very good guidelines for people in this space. And in the UK, United Kingdom, the government's consumer empowerment strategy is something we think is very forward-leading. And indeed, they have created a project called My Data, which is all about helping enterprises to release data back to the individual, to let the individual know what sort of data is being held about them, and to allow that individual to control the use of that data. And big corporations like British Gas, EDF, Google, Lloyds, MasterCard, Visa, Royal Bank of Scotland are involved in this project called My Data, and it's certainly one to watch. In Europe, the EU are funding a number of public-private partnerships for local municipalities and regions to create infrastructure for the exploitation of personal data and digital identities to improve public services, for example, like employability. In the area of software and code, there is some startling developments going on to try and make personal data not only transportable and mashable, but also to embed those rights within the code, within the data, so it can be clearly, it can flow more freely. And there is great innovation, not only in academia, at MIT, with their ID Cubed project, but also with startups who are creating personal data services and personal data stores around the world, particularly in the United States and Europe at the moment. So personal data, from the telco point of view, is a key lubricant of what we've been calling the two-sided business model. And as people who've been following Telco 2.0 know, it's about helping connect third-party enterprises and government with our end users, helping them to reduce friction and reduce costs in their everyday interactions. And in so doing, help telcos to deepen relationships, not only with consumers and third parties, increase their relevance in the digital economy, and generate new revenues. Now, the most important asset is the customer data that flows through telco networks. So we have an enormous amount of rich data that we can exploit. But our role is to be custodians of that data on behalf of our customers and our users and help them exploit it in the way I've described earlier on. Telefonica have a project called Digital Confidence, and that's a starting point on the way to the sort of business models and approaches I described before. This is about giving back control of the personal data that they hold, Telefonica holds about users, and allowing the user to see how much information is held about them and allow them to decide how much they want to expose to access new types of services. We think this is a very interesting development and something that everybody should keep a close watch on. Now, at our recent executive brainstorm, we asked executives how important personal data services was for the telecoms industry from a strategic point of view. And our audience of senior strategists said that it's either very or quite important today for telcos to provide personal data services to consumers in the future. About 75% said very important or quite important. So we know or people seem to agree it's important. We do also recognise that this type of concept is going to take some years to go mainstream, maybe 5 to 8 years, but the time to start is now. So finally, to wrap up, in terms of personal data, our suggestion on next steps are the following. Firstly, all organisations should seek to understand this topic more fully. It's a very subtle and complex topic. I've breezed over it very quickly in this presentation. Having done that, we need to create a customer data and personal data services strategy and start doing it now. Some companies have started, the vast majority have not. There are plenty more videos in the video bank on New Digital Economics Online where we have other people who are describing other parts and aspects of this topic. So I encourage you to have a look at that. And then in terms of the World Economic Forum's Rethinking Personal Data project, there are some tiger teams being set up at the moment to push forward certain aspects of the topic. Please ask me for more information on that. And in terms of events coming up, we're running some physical events in Silicon Valley and in London over the next few months. And of course, our research continues to look at this topic and we publish that. So thanks for listening to me today. I hope it's been interesting. There is more information on our website, and please don't hesitate to email me directly with any questions or comments. Thank you.